I had the opportunity to go back to my home reserve, which is Lac Seul First Nation. Lac Seul is in northern Ontario. And while I was there, I got to spend a lot of time with my grandparents, Patty and Ida Kenny. And my grandpa shared with me a very impactful story that has really lasted me to today. While we were out fishing on the lake, he told me he remembered a time when he was a kid, when families were coming back from their summer hunts, and there was nothing to come back to. Everything was removed. Nobody was there, and their homes are gone. What happened? In 1928, the government of Canada flooded Lac Seul to create a hydroelectric dam. This was done without the consent or the information provided to Lac Seul First Nation. Now just sit with that for a minute. If you were to go on summer vacation and you were to come back home and nothing was there, your family and friends weren't there, and your home wasn't there, it was as if their lives had turned upside down.
The Lac Seul First Nation story is not a unique one in this country. Whether it be my hometown of Membertou that was forcefully relocated, the expansion of a golf course in Kanesatake, anti-fracking protests in Elsipogtog, or the arrest of land defenders in Wet'suwet'en. It's something that each of us on stage could relate to when we're thinking about what topic we want to research and what we could do to create lasting impact. We decided on the implementation of free, prior, and informed consent, which when done correctly, it ensures that injustices like at Lac Seul will not happen. It ensures everyone's on the same page, that proponents are using efficient and sustainable practices, that local Indigenous knowledge is integrated into the design, delivery, management, and repatriation of resource extraction projects. When we're talking about free, prior, and informed consent, we are talking from the definition as outlined in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, which became law in this country in 2021, with the commitment on the federal government to create an action plan by 2023. When we were reviewing this, we noticed what was missing was the federal or the provincial and territorial governments that those orders have jurisdiction over natural resources. An obvious gap.
Throughout the research stage of this project, which included having interviews with key researchers, lawyers, knowledge holders across communities, reviewing various reports, as well as the study tours we had the opportunity to go on through this fellowship, we identified several key barriers to the implementation and realization of free, prior, and informed consent, three of which I will speak to today. Number one is viewing Indigenous nations as merely stakeholders. And let's not forget that this is rooted in colonial ideology and colonial rhetoric, going back to times of early European exploration and regarding Indigenous peoples as less than human, as subhuman, and non-human, to then give explorers themselves permission to lay claim to these lands that we refer to as Turtle Island. This narrative is still alive and well today. We are not merely stakeholders. We come from nations, and we are rights holders. A second key barrier that we identified, which kind of picks up on some of the threads that my colleague Tyler put forward, is the misalignment and inconsistent application of free, prior, and informed consent. Right? We have the federal government and the Crown with the responsibility of the implementation of treaties. And then you have the regulation and the responsibility of natural resources lying with for provincial governments as well as territorial governments. Creates a lot of gray area, a lot of inconsistency, and there have only been two provinces, I should say one province and one territory, British Columbia and Northwest Territories, that have actually adopted legislation related to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And lastly, a lack of capacity. I think we could speak a lot about this area, but something we really wanted to think critically is even just the definitions of free, prior, and informed consent, and specifically diving into that word free. And when you look at the United Nations definition, it speaks about free as being without duress or free from duress. And when we look at many Indigenous nations across this country, folks are very much in survival mode, managing crises from day to day, whether it is just trying to access clean drinking water, the epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit folks in this country, language reclamation, etc. Doesn't leave maybe too much room to figure out how to navigate the gray area and the inconsistencies that we see in application. This also applies to potential partners or proponents where that gray area may lead to confusion and they just kind of walk away from a project altogether.
Now the hopeful part, where we get to talk about what we can do to create positive change based on what we learn from our experts and research. There are 5 main areas of recommendation I get to speak to. The first is really about codifying what our Supreme Court has already decided. Currently, our laws are based on the doctrine of discovery that says that Turtle Island was empty of governance, empty of people, empty of rights before Europeans came. We need to tear up the doctrine of discovery as the fundamental basis for our written law. Second, we need to have our government agencies and our regulatory bodies implement free, prior, and informed consent as a minimum expectation. Currently, these bodies are given the difficult task of figuring out how these Supreme Court decisions apply, and sometimes if they apply. And this creates uncertainty for them, for proponents, and for everyone working with them. Third, we need to talk about land. We need to talk about rights. And we need to talk about that because how do you apply these laws if you don't know what they apply to? If you look at Cody's example, they lost 11,000 acres of land. How can we talk to that nation until they understand what restitution looks like? How can we talk to that nation before we understand what their current rights are? And if you look at these 3 recommendations, you'll see that this is a lot about reconciling the past so we can move forward. And you can hear this theme about rights, about putting people back for what sounds like, we need to do this. This is a good thing to do. But it's also, again, if you're a proponent, if you're a government agency talking about resource management, this is a lot before you can start to actually build the prosperity of our nation. And so if you want to build the prosperity of our nation, this is also an investment into our own Canadian prosperity. Maintenant, nous pouvons parler des moyens d'accélérer le changement. Nous devons renforcer les capacités des nations autochtones. Cela inclut la capacité à gérer les ressources, mais aussi à répondre aux besoins fondamentaux de la communauté. En effet, il est très difficile de construire la prospérité économique lorsqu'il faut se concentrer sur l'eau potable. Enfin, mécanismes de collaboration et de conformité amélioreront le processus au fil du temps. C'est le montre que le CLPPP consiste en grande partie à réunir les parties de manière à respecter les droits des autochtones.
So our group would like to really acknowledge that there is no perfect example of implementation of FPIC in Canada. But we do have 2 really good case studies where FPIC implementation was done in some ways. The first case study is Trans Mountain Pipeline. Trans Mountain engaged with over 130 First Nations. They provided detailed information, conducted independent assessments, respected Indigenous governance, and ensured that Indigenous voices were part of decision-making. Ultimately, Trans Mountain went through without the full consent of many First Nations, but this example provides a good example of how FPIC can be done. Another example is the Haisla Nation, with the Cedar Project LNG project. The Cedar LNG is owned by Haisla First Nation. They are the first First Nation to own a Cedar LNG project. They built off the learnings from LNG Canada, conducted their own project, and established a partnership with Pembina LNG to ensure that their values are within their own project. It's an environmentally sustainable project that Haisla First Nation owns. Reconciliation is not dead. It was here yesterday, it's here today, and it'll be here tomorrow. Through successfully implementing FPIC in Canada, we can ensure that stories like mine about Lac Seul will not happen again. Before we end today, we'd just like to end with one quote. When the last tree has been cut down, the last fish caught, the last river poisoned, only then will we realize that money cannot be eaten.
In closing, we just want to give a big Nyawagawa, merci, miigwech, ekosani, wilaliok, thank you to you all for being here and supporting us today. For those of you who've read the report already, thank you for that. A special thank you or merci to renowned Métis artist Christy Belcourt for allowing us to feature her beautiful artwork in this final presentation and in our report. And also a big ekosani and thank you to Melissa Gladue, who is our 5th team member who was unable to be here today, but those of you who are joining online will have the opportunity to engage with her in a few moments. So, Nyawa, thank you very much.